Hey, what's up everybody? I'm Brian Batko from Panther Sports Network alongside Simrath Randhawa and Lucy Matz. And tonight we'll be discussing a preview of the Final Four that's going to be held this weekend in Houston. Of course, the teams we have left, Kentucky and UConn on one side, and Virginia Commonwealth and Butler on the other. So real quickly, just to review how these teams got there. Kentucky had an impressive run through the East region, beating Princeton by 2 in the first round. And then taking down West Virginia from the Big East, and then the big upset everyone was talking about, Ohio State, and then beating UNC impressively in the Elite Eight to make the Final Four. UConn just continuing their hot streak that started in the Big East tournament, dispatched Bucknell easily, then did away with San Diego State, and then of course in the Elite Eight beat Derek Williams and that tough Arizona squad that took down Duke, so they're looking good. And then on the other side of the bracket, the Cinderella teams, Virginia Commonwealth, of course, as everyone knows, coming in from that first four where they beat USC, and then making it all the way through the bracket, beating teams from every conference, Georgetown from the Big East, Purdue from the Big Ten, Florida State from the ACC, and then, of course, the giant Kansas from the Big 12. And then you look at Butler, that came out of the Southeast, unfortunately, the Pitt Panthers bracket where they beat Old Dominion, and then, of course, Pitt in that fateful game that will be controversial and talked about for a long time. But then they went on to beat Wisconsin and beat Florida, and that rounds out the Final Four. So we're going to go ahead and start with previewing both of these matchups, Kentucky and UConn, and Butler VCU. We'll start with UConn and Kentucky. Simrath, why don't you tell us who you think is going to win and give us a key player and an X factor in the matchup for both sides?
Well, I think Kentucky is the best team left in the tournament. I felt they were underseeded going into the region. I think based off what they've done, they've beaten Ohio State, who I still think was the best team in the country. I think that was an amazing feat. I just think they're a very deep team, very young but very deep. They've been getting a lot better. Terrence Jones has been improving. I think the key player for them is Josh Harrelson, who had a great game against Ohio State and helping limit Josh Schellinger and playing tough against him. I like Kentucky here. I think UConn, lots of games they've played. Even though they have a week off, there's still a ton of games. Kemba Walker, I think, might start to fade a little bit. He's kind of struggled against Arizona. Jeremy Lamb was what helped pick up the slack and help them win. I think Kentucky's just firing on all cylinders right now. I like them to top UConn.
Okay, for this matchup, I see that UConn, although they've won 9 games in a row within their past 19 days, they do have Kemba Walker as an incredible leader. He's such a spark to their team, and he's gotten a good run so far, but I think that Kentucky's also going to win because they are a top-to-bottom talented team. They are fresh off 2 big wins over Ohio State and UNC. That's pumping them up a ton. And I think Brandon Knight is just going to go head-to-head with Kemba Walker and take him down. So I definitely think that Kentucky's going to win that one.
Well, I'm going to go against the grain here and pick against you guys and Kentucky. I think UConn is going to win this game. 2 teams that are kind of similar, very talented, but really rely on contributions from freshmen. But UConn has one thing Kentucky doesn't, and that's Kemba Walker. Brandon Knight, yeah, he's a good point guard, but he's really nowhere close to as good as Kemba Walker. And I just think at the end of the day, somehow, Kemba's going to find a way to will this team to victory, and I think UConn is going to get past the Wildcats. So now, looking at the next matchup, VCU-Butler, Simrath, what do you think is going to happen in that?
Well, obviously, this is a very interesting game, the way both teams came here. I think the interesting point is neither of these teams was a fluke. They both beat really good teams. They beat them at their own game. I think Butler, though, at some point, the luck is going to run out. All these one-point games, all these buzzer beaters. How many in a row can you have dating back to last year? With VCU, the one thing is they've whooped these opponents. They're beating Kansas, Georgetown, Purdue. The best teams they've played, they've just whooped straight up. I really like what Shaka Smart's doing there at VCU. I think they'll take down Butler. I think Butler's luck will run out eventually, and I think he'll do so on Saturday.
All right, for this matchup, I think that Rodriguez is going to come out strong and lead the team into a really close game with Butler. As Shaka Smart said it himself, they're not done yet. They have won 4 of their last 5 games within double digits, which is very impressive. However, I think Butler, they have so much experience from last year and overall, and I think they're underrated still. Many view them as the mid-major conference team, but they're playing beyond that level. I think that it's going to be a close game. Butler will take it to the last minute. I think they'll win by 2, which is not shocking as we've seen how they've played so far. I think Butler will win it.
Yeah, this is a really close matchup and tough for me to pick. I mentioned that I think Kentucky and UConn are pretty similar teams. I think these two teams can't really be much different. VCU, a team that's really playing with a lot of confidence and just kind of riding on that high emotion that they've had since the start of the tournament. And then Butler, on the other side of things, they're kind of just that cool team that's steady-handed, and they get a lot of that from their coach, Brad Stevens. They're just kind of very methodical and know what they want to do, and they kind of keep an even keel. But I think this is going to be a really, really interesting game. Of course, two mid-majors, so we're going to have one of those Cinderella teams in the national title game for the second straight year. Of course, it was Butler last year. I think the key players in this game is Jamie Skeen from VCU. This is a guy that's just blown up in the NCAA tournament and really rocketing up a lot of NBA draft boards. And then I think Matt Howard from Butler, who will most likely be matching up with Skeen. At the end of the day, I think it's going to be extremely close, like Lucy said, but I think the Butler Bulldogs are going to win it. I think the X factor here is they need to defend the three-point line because that's where VCU has been making a living all tournament with Brandon Roselle, Bradford Burgess, and then Skeen, and like Lucy said, Joey Rodriguez running the show. But Butler has really impressed me this tournament. They're a team that they'll just grind it out. They'll make you play their style. And really, I think Brad Stevens is the best young coach in the NCAA, and he'll find a way to get this team to the national title game once again, which would be remarkable going 2 years in a row as a mid-major. So with that all being said, we'll just go ahead and give our picks for the national champion this year, as all three of us have different teams facing off in the title game. But we'll go ahead and give you our national champion and tell you why.
I'm going to have Kentucky against VCU, and I really think this is a dead even matchup. I know VCU is going to go in as an underdog, but I really think this is a pick'em game. Kentucky's been outstanding, but so are the teams VCU beat in the tournament heading into this. I'm going to go with Kentucky here. I think just too much talent overall. I think talent will beat the great coaching of Shaka Smart, Brandon Knight, Terrence Jones, and then Josh Harrelson inside I think will be a little much for VCU to handle. I think overall Kentucky just top to bottom is a little bit better. It'll be almost like last year's championship game, a big conference power, big non-conference power against a big conference power. I think Kentucky will edge it out there.
All right, I have Kentucky winning it all. I think that Josh Harrelson, he's such a key player at this moment. Against Ohio State, he had 17 points, 10 rebounds. He picked up his game against this huge Ohio State team, and he's become a great player along with Brandon Knight. He's a strong, young leader, and I think the two of them are going to do well along with the rest of their cast. I think that they're ready, they're experienced, and they want this all. They're going to go the entire way.
Wow, so we have 2 votes for John Calipari's Kentucky Wildcats, but you know I'm not going to have that because I don't even have them making it past UConn because like I said earlier, I have UConn and Butler in my national title game. This should be an interesting one because if there's any team in the nation that can stop Kemba Walker, it might be the Butler Bulldogs. They have Ronald Norred, who will just follow him around everywhere and be a pest like he did to Pitt's Ashton Gibbs. And they're just a strong defensive team in general. Brad Stevens really knows how to coach, and I think if any coach out there can take Kemba Walker out of the game completely, it might be him. But that being said, I don't think any team can completely take Kemba Walker out of the equation. I think he's going to be too much for him when it all comes down to it. UConn's supporting cast, if they can get anything from those guys at all, they're going to be really tough to beat. And if the Huskies can hit perimeter shots, I just don't see any way Butler can really contain them because when you're hitting from the outside, Kemba Walker can kind of get into the paint at will. It pains me to say this, but I think this is UConn's year, and really it would be remarkable because they're a team that was kind of picked in the middle of the pack of the Big East to start it out. But I have UConn beating Butler in the national championship game and finishing this amazing run that started in the Big East tournament, and really with Kemba Walker hitting that buzzer beater shot over Pitt center Gary McGee. So that's my pick, UConn Huskies over the Butler Bulldogs in the national championship game. And that'll do it for us here on Panther Sports Network. For Simrath and Lucy, I'm Brian Badko. Thanks for watching and enjoy the Final Four.